Hello and welcome to John and James Live. My name is John Hastings and I'm with my co-host, the one, the only, Mr. James CeeLo. How are you today, sir?
Oh, it's
Feeling
wonderful,
good,
isn't
eh?
it? Wonderful Wednesday.
You just went to the gym to pump some iron, like that, James. Dedication.
Mate, there's nothing like it.
It's what you do, get it in the bag. So today we're going to be talking about, well, I said, let's come up with a subject for today. And we went around the houses a little bit and I said, okay, sustainability. And what was your first reaction, James?
What is sustainability?
No, it wasn't. He was like, this, I'm not really feeling this. This is boring. And
It's
that's something which
Well,
then
therein lies the problem.
It spiked my interest when you said that, James, because then I thought, wow, James is a barefoot running eco vegan, and even you're bored with sustainability. So I thought, wow, if the message is not hitting with you, then you're already the converted and you're not really interested. Then what is it doing for everybody else? So we're going to talk about the sustainability challenge. And I did study, I don't know if I told you that I studied with Cambridge University, James. I don't know if I've mentioned that this hour a few times on business sustainability leadership.
The last couple of minutes.
I haven't mentioned it for a while, have I? But to be honest, James, I was a little bit disappointed with the course. I wanted to get into the nitty gritty, the solutions, and it turned out to be a lot of jargon, first of all, and I don't know. It was just a bit boring, to be honest. It wasn't what I was expecting. I wanted to, figure out what the real depth of the problems were, and it seemed a little bit superficial. And then I went into sort of education mode where you just feel like you need to pass the test, and I did well on the test and passed it all. But I was just I left a little bit like I didn't feel good. A little bit, yeah. I wasn't really feeling it.
So can you identify the specific bits that it sort of fell short on? Was there anything particular that you would have hoped it would have gone into more detail about? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think it really did cover things that we could do in terms of like circular economy, not waste, and highlighting the big problems. But it didn't really get to the weeds of, root cause psychology of capitalism and this evolution of capitalism and market economics and what is that actually doing, and the contradictions of, planned obsolescence and the contradictions of just business itself. It didn't get to the grips of like property ownership and how that affects things and short-termism. And it touched on it a little bit, but it was like trying to put a plaster on a broken leg a little bit. And then it
sounds like it was a little bit politically correct,
a little bit, and
but it was being kind of sanitized a bit and slightly sort of state controlled.
I know. I don't want to poo-poo it completely, because there was obviously.
Oh, come on, mate. Why not?
I don't think I've ever used that word poo-poo before. That's a first.
Not quite in that way.
Poo-poo. that does not sound.
You've changed. You've gone very.
That does not sound cool.
That is not the vernacular of the street.
The streets of London will be ashamed of me for using that.
If you went around saying that on the streets of London, I don't know how long you'd last.
I don't know. I'm even sweating and blushing after saying that.
Well, you should. I think you should go and have a word.
I'm never going to say that again.
Certainly not live.
But I don't even know. I've lost my chain of thought now, to be honest. It just didn't go. It wasn't what I was expected, but I learned quite a bit, and some of it was interesting. But we'll go through sustainability.
You need to clearly educate me.
I will educate you, James, on what actual sustainability means. So I've got the definition of sustainability means meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Balances of environmental health, social equity, and economic viability. But there is a problem. Says the word sustainability has become a corporate PR tool, a political afterthought, and watered down term that often masks business as usual. So we maybe call that a greenwashing situation, where it
It is a
sounds
political hot potato, isn't it?
cool, but I'm a carnivore and you're a vegan. Is that I used to be a vegan, but I did transition back probably through laziness and not being able to digest beans very well. But was that a sustainability conscious decision, James, or was that more a personal?
It was just for my own personal health and well-being.
You couldn't care less about the planet and
no, that's unfair, mate. That is unfair. I'm going to push back against that. Certainly initially it was purely selfish reasons. I thought I'd give it a go, but actually since doing it, I think there's a sense of feeling quite self-satisfied that I am, dare I say it, treading lighter on the earth. Yeah, now, that's not in a sort of supercilious way, but it kind of has developed, I suppose, in that respect to make me feel like actually I'm doing less harm, whether that's the case or not. It feels that way. Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of the stuff that, we've got listed, pumped it into ChatGPT, it came out with 10 main issues facing sustainability, the environmental sustainability. So one of them being sort of deforestation and use of water. And I think it's pretty well known that the cattle industry, the beef industry, uses a lot of both of those in terms of deforestation, in terms of water use, land use, resources, that's unsustainable.
Yeah. So we reel off some of these major issues just to get people warmed up. Then we'll talk about, the impacts of each and where we're going sort of on a trajectory and how we can potentially overcome these. Yeah.
Let's do it.
I'll reel them off. So first of all, major sustainability challenges. Climate change. First of all, global temperatures have risen by 1.2 Celsius. Since pre-industrial times, we're on track for 2.5 to 3 Celsius by 2100 without drastic intervention. The last 8 years have been the hottest on record. Yeah, it does get the temperatures are a bit weird at the moment, aren't they? It's sometimes you get a bit of a drought. I know for major places around the world, it becomes a problem. I know for the World Cup, Club World Cup at the moment, they're saying it's way too hot in America to play football. Could be a problem next year for the World Cup. So, I'm not saying the world revolves around the World Cup, but, it's something that a lot of people are interested in. But that has implications, doesn't it, James? If you can't grow crops and your crops are dying off because it's too hot and being burnt, then all of a sudden you're going to have some mass immigration of people that just can't survive. They're going to move into the cities. And there's all sorts of implications, isn't there? Like the sea level rise and things like that. So these are big issues here. We've got biodiversity loss. The planet has lost 69% of wildlife populations since 1970.
What percentage?
69% of wildlife populations since 1970. That's from the WWF Living Planet report.
Holy moly.
Over 1 million species are at risk of extinction. That's from the UN IPBES. We're living through the 6th mass extinction driven by human activity. So biodiversity loss is a huge problem because it just cascades, doesn't it? So
anecdotally, what I have noticed this year, last year we had hardly any insects in our garden. Very few ants, very few
Interesting.
bees buzzing around, flies splatting on your windscreen. This year is an abundance.
Seriously?
There's a lot of ants. I had to do my own little humane ant relocation program because they managed to get into the house. There was a line of ants going up into one of my cupboards. So I got my little handheld Dyson, sucked them all up, and then relocated them elsewhere. And I didn't have to do that last year. And loads of bees.
Temperature change, is that
flies.
what it is, do you think?
Well, I don't know, mate. I don't know.
It's
but it's whether,
tell, isn't it?
Yeah, it could be sort of, we had a particularly wet winter, drier summer, whether these conditions are more conducive.
Yeah.
But seemingly we've had a resurgence and a coming back of insects, which is only a good thing, isn't it? In respect
I think we're a little bit sheltered in England, aren't we, in terms of we don't really get the extreme. So I guess with the climate change stuff, it's going to affect places where you do get the presence of hurricanes and flood. Like we do get flooding here, but there's other parts of the world where like it could be a lot worse. So places like the Middle East and stuff, or Africa, where it's just singeing hot. You just it's just hard to survive, isn't it? I guess so. That's a huge problem. Soil degradation, James. So 33% of the world's soil is already degraded. I wonder if that some overuse issue. Industrial agriculture kills soil microbes vital for plant and ecosystem health. Yeah, it says all topsoil could be gone in 60 years. That's from the UNFAO. We need problems. I remember on the course it did said that the coffee bean was going to be at risk by like 2080. Oh, imagine that your coffee.
I couldn't cope.
Yeah,
I could not cope with that.
Happens. That could be an issue. So we've got animal
growing coffee beans.
It could be the next one. Like you've said here, livestock farming contributes to 14.5% of all greenhouse gases. 80% of global agriculture land is used for animal farming. We're killing billions of animals annually, often in cruel, unsustainable conditions. We just never used to eat that much meat, did we? This is a phenomenon at the moment. Yeah. The amount of production of food, a third of the food is thrown away. It's a big problem, James, isn't it? Huge. It's a huge problem. Water scarcity.
If we just cut down. I'm not saying everybody has to go vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian, whatever, but just a slight reduction.
It makes it expensive, James. I don't know if you probably haven't checked, have you, recently? But
I buy salmon occasionally because my wife likes salmon, and that's hugely expensive.
It's so you're kind of thinking, is the expense a good thing? Should you put things like a sugar tax? Should it be a protein tax? I don't know. You're kicking people while they're down, aren't you? I guess it's like everyone's struggling already financially. So I don't know if that's the right way to go. We sort of need to be more conscious beings, don't we? Around myself and my wife have taken your lead on cutting down. Not to veganism, but we're going, every other day in terms of meat
and it
intake.
All adds up. It all adds up.
It's huge. If we did every other day, it's massive, isn't it? It's huge. Water scarcity, James. 2.2 billion people lack access to safe drinking water. That's something we take for granted here, which is incredible, isn't it? What a crazy stat that is. Groundwater depletion is accelerating in major regions like India, the US, and China. Climate change is drying rivers, the Colorado, and even parts of the Thames. Deforestation, like you said, 10 million hectares of forest lost annually. Amazon rainforest nearing a tipping point where it could become a savanna. Deforestation driven by soy. 80% for animal feed, palm oil, and beef. So the soy is an issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this food intakes I know we've gone from 1 to 8 billion people in the last 150 years. We've got to feed people, definitely. That's the thing. But then there's the overconsumption of food, the wrong foods. So we're over-consuming calories, but we're still malnourished. Plus, we're throwing away a third of it. So we're just not efficient, are we, in the way we're consuming calories at all? So it's a major
when you look
issue
at supermarkets and you go in there and all the food has to be perfect size, perfect shape.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we won't buy it, apparently. This is what we're being told. And you've got then companies, actually some supermarkets have started doing it. They've sort of brought out wonky food.
Yeah, wonky potatoes and bananas that are just not quite right.
Yeah. And I think, well, how have we got to this point where we have to have perfect?
Yeah.
And think of the waste that's involved in perfection. And, GM cropping and everything else that has to be involved in that and the downstream effects. You just think, well, why can't we have food that looks like food?
Yeah.
Why have we got to have it a particular color, particular shape, particular size? I understand from, again, microeconomics of packaging that if it's all uniform, you can get more in a box.
That's true.
Transport's better. I understand that. But, it's a serious detriment to wastage. You think the cost of that weighed up against the cost of inefficiency in transport. And obviously then you've got air miles on food too, that we're not eating necessarily locally, that we're having food imported from anywhere in the world at any time of the year.
Yeah.
So again, seasonal foods. We're not eating seasonally, we're eating the foods at any time of the year. So
it's a big problem, isn't it, James? The food industry, there's so much waste, and then there's obviously the chemicals added with the fertilizers, which are obviously not good for you either. There's a degradation of soil, there's the abuse of animals. It's really, then we've got all the packaging, all the plastics that are used to package the food. Again, the amount and just the level of waste, the level of waste a supermarket must be crazy, mustn't it?
And I think, I don't know, again, maybe look up the stats though, John, on how much of what we put into recycling actually physically gets recycled. It's such a small percentage. It's like, what, 10% maybe actually gets recycled? I don't know.
I'd have to check that one out, actually, on that one. Then we've got climate-induced migration, like we just said. Estimated 1.2 billion people could be displaced by climate change by 2050. That's the Institute for Economics and Peace. Africa, Southeast Asia, and low-lying Pacific Islands are most vulnerable. Mass migration could increase political instability and border conflict. It's already a big talking point now, isn't it? Let alone the wars that are kicking off, and if people can't survive because it's boiling, or they're being completely flooded because the rest of the world is, there is debate still over whether this is human-induced climate change, or I think there is a consensus with scientists, but there are still voices out there that question that, which is not a bad thing. I think it's good that people still...
We have to challenge.
We have to challenge, yeah. I definitely think we have to challenge these things and question them. But whichever way, even if it's hotting up, if it's human induced or it's not, it's still going to cause an issue, isn't it? If it's flooding, it's not good. So then we've got the food insecurity and famine. So 345 million people face acute insecurity globally. That's food insecurity. Food systems are fragile, often reliant on global supply chains and monocultures. Climate shocks are reducing yields and increasing prices. It seems to be a lot about I think the food. When people go hungry, that's when there's revolutions, isn't there? It's It wouldn't take long for there to be a food shortage. We know what it was like with toilet paper. Imagine if it was actual food. You know, it could be absolute mayhem, couldn't it? To be honest.
Yeah.
We've got the energy injustice. 770 million people still lack access to electricity, which is insane. Meanwhile, the richest 10% emit more than half of global emissions. So that really pushes us into the big problem of mass inequality, James. So the world's richest 1% grabbed 2/3 of the new wealth created since 2020. That's Oxfam report. The poorest are most affected by climate change through though they contribute the least. Then we've got consumerism and race, mental health and disconnection, and that's pretty much the main talking points with sustainability. But when we say sustainability, James, why is it so boring in your mind? It is a little bit for me, to be honest, and I'm a sort of sustainability advocate. What's the gist of it?
I don't know that boring is the right word. I think maybe it's overwhelming, and then you wrap it up as boring. It's like we're all in this situation where we are struggling to know what to do and how we can best impact, and we feel maybe like we're in a vacuum with this, that actually anything we do doesn't make a huge difference, but collectively do instead of it didn't poo-poo it.
Instead of poo-poo and the doo-doo, Jesus. What's going on?
It's a combination of the two. It's like, because it's not abundantly and very quickly apparent as to what we're doing is making an impact, that the more pressing issues that we're facing kind of take over, don't they?
Yeah, I think it's a priority thing, isn't it, James? I think when you're under pressure, you know, you start to think, is sustainability like a upper middle class, higher class problem for most people? Because you're waking up every day, you're trying to pay your bills, you're trying to feed your kids and survive. You know, you're talking about a 1 degree temperature change that's going to affect, the middle of Africa. It doesn't really impact you as much when you've just got to pay your electricity bills here. I get it. You need some type of capacity, don't you, James, for most of these problems, whether it's feeding starving children or there's wars abroad. It's not until it's impacting you directly. That's not for everybody, because people like myself, people like you, there's lots of people who are interested in bigger picture things that are going on. But I don't know, is it a luxury, James, to even be thinking about this?
Well, it's having the headspace, isn't it?
It's having the headspace, yeah, to do it.
Because like you said, I think if you are, facing some serious financial crises and, socioeconomic stuff, if you're up against it, then it's like you're in survival mode. And you're not thinking about saving the planet necessarily. And it's like seemingly people with time on their hands that can really give it some thought and be mindful about it and take on that responsibility, that can't be expected of everybody. But I don't know, what do you think about some sort of governmental incentivization monetarily of starting to become a lot more environmentally aware, that we could be paid or have some reward for being that way? I think maybe that would focus the mind, wouldn't it? If there was some tangible reward for changing behavior.
Like paying for plastic bags, is that a reward, or that's like an incentive to be
that's
more
an incentive
sustainable,
to recycle plastic bags, isn't it? It's like if you're paying 10p every time you go to the supermarket, or multiples of 10p for every plastic bag, which I agree with.
Yeah.
Because it then starts to very slowly change behavior, that you're then, before you go out shopping, fishing out a load of old bags that you've had stored away in the cupboard, and you just go and take those with you. It's habit forming. It's just now part of the process of going shopping that you're going to go and grab a load of bags and take them with you. It's what I do, and I'm not special in any way in that respect. But in terms of recycling, in terms of buying from more sustainable sources, cost is an issue. You know, if it's organic, it's more expensive.
It's very pricey. It's pricey, yeah.
And people aren't driven by that necessarily. Only if you're in an economic situation to be able to afford that. So how can everyday produce be made in a more sustainable, produced in a more sustainable way with a price point to match? That's a tricky one. But until it comes to a parity that it is affordable, then you've got to incentivize in some way for people to actually engage in that. I don't know that you can rely on people's sensibilities around climate change and what's happening globally, because maybe there's sort of this delayed gratification or this projecting into the future thing that people are assuming that it won't affect their generation, but it will affect your kids' generation.
It will
there's
do,
responsibility
James,
on us for that. But
yeah.
again, it's what the answer is. What can we practically do to change that situation in a meaningful way?
And what do we do as a small country like England to make a difference? Maybe you're doing your own thing, trying to do the best in your own world, but maybe that's not going to be, it's not going to make any ounce of difference if there's another big nation just depleting stuff and making a mess somewhere else. You just think, what's the point?
Well,
that's the argument some people would have, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But again, should you just leave
economies like America that seemingly flouting, G7 kind of directives? And you think, well, if they're doing it and they're a superpower, then what's the point?
I think is a good point, James. And a lot of this probably comes down to, we've put it as, does sustainability need rebranding? And it's like anything, like politics. It's all about positioning, isn't it? It's all about the messaging, the positioning. And I'm thinking maybe the word sustainability. I said this back in 2017 when I did the course. I said I think the word might be a problem, because when life's not good or bad, you don't really want to sustain it. So if you say to someone, right, make your life that's rubbish and the system's not good more sustainable, it's not something that you're working towards that's fun. It's already feels bad, so why would I want to sustain it? I think it needs a vision of something else, of what that would be like. So if you take away the beef burgers from somebody and they like that, they get their, they might have their barbecues. This is about community. What are you replacing that with? How are you making life better in some way? And plus, we've got, James, the association with sort of left-wing political ideology. So you think about sustainability, and then I think there's an issue where you think it's somebody with middle class going on a gap year, then they've gone off to do sustainability, they're wearing beads like you, they've grown a beard like me, they've become a vegan, they're hugging trees, and now they're stopping traffic in the road for
they become an outlier, don't they? They become a sort of pastiche, a caricature. It
becomes that, doesn't it?
And then people will pigeonhole and say, well, that's an eco warrior. They'll identify that particular individual. It's like, it's a phase, it's a whatever, and very quickly they'll become disillusioned because actually change isn't possible. You come into it with the sort of the wide-eyed optimism of doing your bit as your eco warrior alter ego, and then it's a phase that you'll grow out of. That's the perception. That is the perception. As you age, as you become more disillusioned, you sort of come back to earth with a bump, that maybe you visited some indigenous tribe and saw how they were living sustainably, and you thought, oh my God, this is amazing. And you then try and bring it back to normal, let's say normal society and the culture you've grown up in, and find that people are just like completely out of tune and not interested, because they're so busy living their own lives. They're just so caught up in just surviving every day. You know, and it's exposure to different cultures, exposure to different things generally. But fundamentally, there has to be a desire to change. Like you said, there has to be an incentive and to move towards something that's attractive. And maybe it is storytelling. Maybe it is a vision of the future that can be put forward as something that's exciting, achievable, attainable.
I agree,
and unifying for everybody to get behind. It has to be a really strong mission statement to say, because...
And selfish, maybe, James. Maybe it needs to be a bit more about the self.
I think what we've tried is it's very much like sort of smoking cessation. If you look at all the fear mongering, and it's absolutely justified, the research is there, but even on packets of cigarettes now with no branding, they're white packets with black wording on it and pictures of, you know, cancerous growths and limb loss and lung porridge and all that sort of thing, and very stark warnings. Even that isn't enough to put people off smoking necessarily. Now, socially, it's
some. I think it has decreased, isn't it, James?
Oh, it has decreased, but it's not sufficient in respect. And even people trying to stop smoking, it's not enough for them to be, you know, told that this is going to shorten their life. I think socially it's become less acceptable, definitely, through, you know, not having smoking in public places. Absolutely, I don't disagree with that at all. But I think the messaging on the packaging still hasn't been sufficient to make people that I know that smoke look at that and go, that could be me. So it's the sort of fear mongering that doesn't necessarily work.
Yes.
So by us saying that if we don't do anything now, the world is going to come to a fiery end. It'll implode. You know, the sun will go out at some point anyway. We know that. But that seems like sort of millennia away. So that's not relevant right now. But the fact that climate change is a close and present danger, again, doesn't seem to be sufficient to change the rhetoric. So
you're right.
It needs to be something that's entirely attractive and exciting.
Well, humans just become, you get desensitized, don't you? It was even on the, with the charity about, you know, starving children in Africa. If you see that all the time, you become desensitized to it. You know, I'm not saying you don't still feel it and it's hard to watch, but if you're seeing it all the time, it's just human nature. It's like, okay, it just becomes the norm, and it feels like a movie that you're just watching.
And they'll use, you know, this is pretty, you know, a pretty jaundiced view on my part, but I think it's true, is that they'll use an image of a very attractive baby or child with sort of big eyes, imploring eyes, looking out the camera. What you haven't got is some sort of child wizened and, you know, kind of impacted by hunger, because they know that that will be a way of engendering empathy and sympathy and action.
Yeah.
As opposed to being, oh my God, that's horrendous. And sort of not then encouraging action.
Yeah, it's sort of like, that's horrendous, what's on TV tonight, isn't it?
Yeah, because you'll distract yourself because it's too overwhelming.
You're sort of back on a doom scroll. So it is a problem. So I think sustainability, the word, it seems a little bit vague as well, doesn't it? It doesn't, when you say describe it, like I described it at the beginning, again, it's not like a one-liner, because you don't really want to repeat the system, do you? So you don't really want to make it sustainable. You want to make it, I don't know, you want to make Earth hospitable for humans to actually live and thrive, I guess, but we sort of need a new description word of where we're going. But it's difficult. We definitely need the rebrand, but it needs thought, doesn't it? We need the associations to change from the, tree hugging type of crazy type person who's stopping traffic and stuff like that, or spraying buildings, to actually maybe sitting down and having people that are,
people don't want to be made to feel shit. They don't want to be made to feel guilt and shame. It's like this whole kind of finger wagging thing. It's like, well, you are solely responsible for the degradation of the climate and the earth, and you're being irresponsible. People don't want to hear that, because they'll go in entirely the opposite direction. And I think,
and you're vegan. You're someone to speak to that, aren't you? As a vegan, the vegan community are notorious for being a little bit like that.
And it doesn't work. How the hell can I be, as a person who ate meat for 45 odd years, come out and say, you're wrong, you're this, you're that, for eating meat? I can't in good faith to say that, because it's just a crazy position to take, and people don't want to hear it. They don't want to be made to feel shameful for buying meat, or for not looking at the implications or the impact. And as soon as you go down that route, you just get a brick wall. The defenses come up and there's no conversation. So what's the point? And as I said, I can't take that position anyway, because I was one of those people for 45 years.
Yeah, we've got to have that EQ, that understanding. But on the flip side, James, I would say there's part of me that does like the tenacity, the conviction of people who are really, shouting from the rooftops of, there's something going on here. We're killing the oceans. There's not enough water. There's people dying. The banking system has to change.
I do
people
agree,
are
mate,
marching the streets. They're passionate. They want to change.
I get it, but fundamentally there needs to be a very clear and simple solution that people can get on board with. If it's too complicated, if it's too overwhelming, they'll just go, I can't do anything about it. It's too big a problem. For somebody like me as an individual, we don't see things collectively. Don't see, well, actually, if we had a groundswell of change that everybody could get on board with, that literally probably overnight, there would be a huge change. So all the time we're living in our sort of silos of individualism and, trying to figure this thing out. If there was a comprehensive roadmap to where we would all need to go collectively, I think people could get on board with that better, as opposed to like, well, actually, and even just simple recycling. It's like, well, what can I recycle? What can't I recycle? Now, there's a list of things in my green bin, what I can put in there, and things that I can't. And even reading that, I'm still putting stuff in that I shouldn't put in there.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it's just like, at that moment in time, it's like, I don't want to have to think about it.
Yeah, that reminds me of, like, on the course they had these, I can't remember what they're called because I did it so long ago, but G something or others, which are like what we need to do to improve stuff. And there was like 30 odd of them, like 33 of them, and I was just like, oh my God, people, you could barely...
3 of them maybe, not 33.
Max, maybe 1 to 3 things that people can do. Maybe you need to do stuff in the background on the others, but you give him, companies of people 33 things to do. You're not going to get any done with any proficiency, are you? To be honest, it's just not going to happen.
No.
So you can see where this, comes up with it's huge barriers to it. And I don't know if just like with our clients, James, we can tell them in the past when we was PTing that if you carry on eating like this, you're going to have a heart attack. If you carry on drinking like this, you're going to have cancer. You're going to do what? It's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to tell people in 10 years time, 20 years time, this is the trajectory, when in the process of doing it, it sort of makes them feel better short term. Yeah. It's like, what do you do about it, James? What do you do about it? But in terms of what the stuff is out there to do, James, it says, let's have a look. So major solutions proposed. So regenerative agriculture, builds soil, increases biodiversity, captures carbon. The challenge requires systems change and local farmer empowerment, not just subsidies. I know a lot of the American food industry, there's a lot of all the companies are sort of merging together, aren't they? There's a lot of monopolies now where there used to be like thousands of farmers. So they have got a lot of power and control where makes decision making, I guess, difficult to do. The other one was degrowth and well-being economics. Maybe we don't need GDP anymore. Maybe we need something else to judge how society's going. Focus on sufficiency, equity, and thriving, not endless GDP growth. Because that's all we hear, isn't it, James, on the news? It's about growth.
GDP. Yeah.
We're not growing. Like infinite growth economics. But where does that go? If inflation just keeps going and a trajectory keeps going now, literally we're on the verge of $1 million chocolate bar. If we just follow that timeline, it's either bury your head in the sand or just actually be truthful and say, look, this is where it's going. If house prices just kept going the way they've gone in the last 70 years, and you'll be paying like 50 million for a one-bed flat in 2050.
Yeah. And it's, wages aren't keeping pace with it. So that is unsustainable.
Massively unsustainable. This is the core of it on that one, James. I mean, it says citizens assemblies and participatory democracy brings real people into climate decision making. Even this, I would say, is difficult, James, when it comes to the political side. I'm a little bit on the fence.
I'm fascinated by this because you look at the likes of cryptocurrency where you've got decentralization, and now you've got governments that are bringing in their own version of crypto.
Yeah.
And at every stage, there's this kind of pushback and adaptation from government to remain relevant. But what if you had a decentralized society? We're all human beings, that we then decide unilaterally what's good for the environment. And that it's not just decided by an elected few to decide the outcomes for the many, that we are abdicating responsibility for the world, for this planet that we live on, down to a few individuals.
Yeah, it's a difficult challenge, isn't it? That?
Collectively, I mean, how dangerous is that? How powerful is that for everybody to go, you know what? We've got one chance. There's only one planet that we've got. And obviously, there's a lot of time, energy, and money being spent on looking to populate other planets. And it's whether then it comes down to a belief system in respect of whether you think this planet that we live on is already doomed, that it's beyond repair. And you've got the likes of carbon capture now that's trying to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and store it, repurpose it. And there's a lot that's been done in that respect, and as the years go by, it becomes more and more effective. And these sort of container size machines that are extracting carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere.
Yeah, there's amazing things out there, isn't
It's
there?
incredible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible. But it's, again, down to a belief system. You think, well, actually, we may get away with it in our generation in terms of you and I mean, 10 years apart, but we might just make it to the end of our lives without catastrophe. But I'm not entirely sure that our children will. So it's everybody's responsibility collectively to do something about it. But if it's just reliant on industry and political parties, it's down to the individual. And yes, they should be taking into account the public voice and the will of the public. But there's a lot more at stake, isn't there? You know, and again, if it's all down to financial institutions and they dictate what happens in terms of governance, then is there hope at all if it's purely financial?
I don't know, James. I really don't know how it's going to go. I know profit incentive changes people's psychology, doesn't it? You're going to have short-termism. You're going to have a lot of bias in what results are in terms of even scientific studies. There can be bias. I said the other day on a post about, you know, science sometimes being quite subjective because it depends who's what you choose to study, who does the study, who does the, you know, how that data has been presented. So it becomes, it's sad, but everything becomes questionable when there is a profit incentive there. So until we overcome that, I get what you're saying about everybody having some type of agency, autonomy to be able to vote and things like that. But then again, I think on the flip side, if I've got a problem with my plumbing, I'm not going to call up all of my family to ask what would they vote is the best next move on how to fix this when none of them have a clue about plumbing. I just want the guy who's an expert. And I think there is a lot of expertise in systems change in terms of economic system change. What you're doing in your little microcosm might not be good when you extrapolate that out to millions of people. So
I can pretty much guarantee, and I think anybody could say the same thing, that the solutions already exist. But the reasons why they're potentially not being effective or implemented is because of bureaucracy. And because maybe it doesn't make financial sense, or maybe somebody hasn't written it off or wouldn't put the money towards it. But I would pretty much guarantee that the solution to climate change and the crisis that we're in already exists, but it hasn't been sanctioned for what reason, one reason or another.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very optimistic. I think things sometimes do have to get really bad before they improve. You know, on an individual level, on a societal global level, sometimes that does have to happen. Sadly, that's just the way consciousness evolves sometimes.
Yeah, but you think if all it takes, because money now is basically boils down to a series of ones and zeros, can be created out of thin air, that why would not every resource be put into saving this planet? Why would they not just go, it doesn't matter how much money it takes? How many of those
vested interest? Because some people, with planned obsolescence, James, if you're creating products and you're incentivized for them to break down, and then people need to rebuy, or if your business is in digging oil, then if somebody says, look, we can put water into a car and it works absolutely fine, there's a massive, what's the incentive for people who are making trillions of dollars, pounds off of these industries
and have the power, the institutional power?
I don't know how it's a big question mark, isn't it? How do you overcome that type of power? A lot of lobbying. Maybe you need somebody with something very innovative. Maybe it is just changing. People are becoming more conscious, aren't they, James? People are sort of waking up there is a bigger movement of plant-based eating, health-wise. People are waking up to chemicals in the environment. Cancers are going up. People's health in general is not good for a large percentage of the population.
Yeah.
Lifestyle, is probably degrading for a lot of people in the West in the last 20 to 50 years. So I guess people are waking up, James, slowly. Is that how it's going to roll out, I guess?
Well, I hope so, mate. I hope so. But what is for sure is that, kids are getting conditions only associated with age. Seemingly we're getting cancers younger, we're getting health issues younger. So the fact that we are living longer is weirdly tempered by the fact that we're getting these kind of conditions younger. So there's this sort of seemingly this equilibrium that even though we are statistically living longer, that there's been a swing to getting conditions only associated with aging younger.
And I guess there's incentive in that as well, isn't there? Because if you're medicating people for a longer period of time, it's worth more money.
Well, so it's just incredible that you're taking medications on top of medications to counter the side effects of medication. So you need to take this medication because you're taking that one. And we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
That it's this never-ending cycle of being, needing these drugs.
Yeah. No, I think this whole sustainability movement probably needs to really prey on people's, I say prey, that sounds very predatory, doesn't it? But we have to just prey on people's...
appeal to people.
Appeal to people's selfish needs. We need to start talking to the individual about how it's going to help them personally, even short term as well, just to get people to the next stage and and bring things in slowly. I think sometimes the bigger picture stuff can, like we said, get desensitized with it, and we need a different association. I think brand is about that association, isn't it? Probably away from certain caricatures and towards others.
It has to make you feel good about yourself. It won't work on fear-based and shame. It has to be something that we can all get behind and feel good about. Yeah.
And what do you say? I think for people, it's always good to be, if you want to lead something or you want to put a message out there, then it's good to lead by demonstration. So what do you say to people who would they say they want to change the world, they're fighting for this, but they're not maybe looking after themselves physically, or they haven't got their own house in order? Do you think you can have both? Has anybody ever got their house in order? Does that mean you can't have an opinion on a bigger stuff if you...
Depends what that kind of looks like, doesn't it? We can only do our best.
Yeah.
We're all just trying to do our best. I think generally speaking, the majority of people are just trying to do their best.
Yeah. But if you can't if you're not looking after your own self and body very well, and you think the complexity of actually changing the world, do you think you should maybe take a step back? And
the knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, you've got to, dare I say it, put on your own oxygen mask before you try helping somebody else.
Yeah. But then again,
when you're talking about
the system that's caused them to be in a certain way, it gets complicated, doesn't it? What comes first, chicken or the egg type of thing?
It does.
And nobody ever is in a perfect state, are they?
No.
So if everybody said, get your house in order before you do anything or say anything, Martin Luther King wouldn't have even said anything because he was having an affair. He didn't have his private life. It wasn't all smelling of roses, but he still had a mission to create something.
Perfect. Yeah.
So
if you're waiting for that, if you're waiting for
Yeah.
the perfect time, it'll never happen. But I just think, again, the sustainability of doing something like that is like if you're not in good health or in a good position to start a campaign, it's going to be fairly short-lived if your health isn't good, or mentally you're not able to sort of sustain it. I think, we certainly need to look to ourselves first and then figure that one out. But none of us.
It helps the cause, though, doesn't it, James? If you're there running around happy, I would say happy. I don't like the word happy, but if you're on a mission, you're content, you're very balanced, you're in good physical shape, you're healthy, then you don't even have to say anything to me about trying to convince me to be vegan.
Lead by example.
I'm just observing you. and then if I'm not feeling good, I'm going to think, oh, geez, that guy, he seems like he's got a lot of energy. He's in good shape. I'm intrigued by this. But if you're not in that place, you're miserable.
There's incongruity.
You're diseased. Yeah. You're not in physical shape, and then you're telling me about acting or living in a certain way.
Well, because in our heads, I mean, anybody will have an image of, let's use veganism as an example, that if you say to anybody about being a vegan, invariably they'll have an image in their head of somebody that's a bit sort of pasty, skinny, low energy, sort of sallow-faced, and a bit kind of beardy-weirdy. And again, a sort of this eco, or in sort of tie-dye, a bit kind of hippie. And as soon as you see somebody that doesn't necessarily fit that stereotype and that image that you have in your head, then it can kind of make you think a little bit. There's vegan bodybuilders, for example, and it's just interesting when you think that everything's predicated on protein coming from animal source, and that's the only quality protein you can get. It's like how many times I've been asked, and people generally, it's like, where do you get your protein from? And I'll just say to them, well, look at the animal kingdom. There's quite a few very muscular animals out there that don't eat any meat whatsoever.
Yeah, gorilla's quite big, isn't it? Rhino's quite decent size.
Yeah.
I know it's a genetic thing. I know we need a certain amount, but yeah, you're right. I think it's this brand association, and we'll go back to that heading. Does sustainability need a rebrand? And I would probably argue yes, and that's something maybe for all of us to come up with, to see how that would work. What associations do we want to put in place? Do we want to go from 33 tasks of what to do to actually just whittle it down, make it simple, just give people 1 to 3 things that they should concentrate on as the biggest levers that make the most change, and start from there? Be the leader, lead by demonstration, be the best version of yourself. And then people are actually just going to take notice anyway, aren't they? They're going to follow James.
Yeah.
So I think
make it exciting. Make it
exciting. Make it super. It can't be all doom and gloom, can it? Like the world's going to end all the time and everything's bad and they're wrong and you're right. It just can't be like that all the time. So it doesn't work.
No.
Doesn't work.
There's no incentive.
Anyway, James, we got through that. I know it was a difficult one for you. That one's the sustainability one, but
I'm converted.
Yeah. We'll come up with a little plan. The top 3 things that people can do, and we'll give the sustainability word a complete makeover. We will do. Thanks, James.
Thank you, mate.
Take care. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.